The cruelest thing a man can do is invite the woman he destroyed to watch him celebrate without her. The crystal chandeliers scattered golden light across the ballroom of the Crown Meridian Hotel in downtown Sydney, while Australia's business elite drifted between marble columns and champagne towers worth more than most people's monthly rent. Waiters in black vests moved silently through the crowd carrying trays of sparkling wine and tiny lobster canapes, while a string quartet played near the stage beneath a glowing sign that read Callaway Holdings, 10 years of excellence. At the center of it all stood Ethan Callaway, tall, broad-shouldered, calm in the way only powerful men could be. His charcoal Tom Ford tuxedo fit perfectly against his athletic frame, and the silver at his temples somehow made him look even more dangerous. Cameras flashed every few seconds as journalists circled him like moths around a flame. Mr. Callaway, one photo here. Ethan, congratulations on the merger. Sir, Forbes Australia wants a quick statement. Ethan answered with practiced ease. Controlled smiles. Firm handshakes. The kind of confidence that came from spending 10 years building one of the most successful investment firms in the country. But beneath the polished surface, something colder moved behind his blue eyes tonight. Something personal. Across the ballroom, his executive assistant Claire adjusted her tablet nervously before stepping toward him. Sir, she said quietly, your guest confirmed attendance. Ethan's jaw tightened almost invisibly. She's actually coming? Claire nodded once. Yes, sir. For a second, the noise of the ballroom seemed to disappear. 6 years. 6 years since Charlotte Hayes walked out of his life with nothing except one suitcase and tear-filled eyes he refused to remember properly. 6 years since the divorce papers landed on his desk during the most important acquisition of his career. Back then, he told himself she left because she couldn't handle his ambition, because she wanted attention he no longer had time to give, because some women loved comfort more than loyalty. And tonight he planned to prove he had won. Ethan lifted his champagne glass slowly while several investors gathered around him. You know, one older board member laughed. I still remember your ex-wife. Beautiful woman. Shame she disappeared. Ethan gave a faint smile that never reached his eyes. Some people aren't built for pressure. A few people chuckled politely. Claire looked away. Even she seemed uncomfortable. Ethan ignored it, because humiliation felt easier than regret. Meanwhile, 20 kilometers away in a small apartment above a bakery in Parramatta, Charlotte Hayes sat on the floor beside her daughter's bedroom door with a needle between trembling fingers. The apartment smelled faintly of detergent and warm bread drifting up from downstairs. A tiny standing fan rattled beside the couch, while rain tapped softly against the windows overlooking the street. Charlotte carefully stitched the loose sleeve on Lily's pale blue cardigan under the dim kitchen light. It was nearly 7 o'clock. She should have left already. But the invitation sitting on the counter felt heavier than concrete. Callaway Holdings Gala. Personal invitation from Ethan Callaway. Her name printed beneath his in elegant silver lettering. As if 6 years of silence could suddenly become sophistication. As if pain could wear a tuxedo. Mom? A small voice called softly from the bedroom. Charlotte looked up immediately. Yes, sweetheart. Little Lily appeared wearing white tights and shiny black shoes 2 sizes too expensive for Charlotte's current budget. Her long blonde curls fell over one shoulder while she held the edge of her cardigan nervously. Does this look okay? Charlotte's expression softened instantly. You look beautiful. Lily smiled shyly. Behind her appeared Noah, carrying a tiny toy dinosaur in one hand, while trying unsuccessfully to fix his own bow tie. Mine keeps twisting, he muttered. Charlotte almost laughed despite the pressure crushing her chest. Noah looked so much like Ethan sometimes it physically hurt. The same sharp jawline. The same blue eyes. The same serious little frown whenever he concentrated. She stood and fixed the bow tie carefully while Noah watched her. Mom, he asked quietly, is Ethan Callaway really our dad? The room went completely still. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. Charlotte's fingers froze against the fabric. There it was. The question she spent 5 years trying to outrun. Children always noticed eventually, especially twins smart enough to connect missing pieces. Lily looked down awkwardly while Noah kept staring at her with innocent honesty. Charlotte swallowed slowly. Why would you ask that? Noah hesitated. Because at school, everyone knows who he is. Oliver said I look exactly like the man from the magazines. Charlotte forced herself to breathe normally. People say lots of things, but Noah didn't look convinced. Neither did Lily. The twins exchanged a glance that made Charlotte's chest ache. They had learned silence young. Too young. She walked toward the kitchen counter and picked up the invitation again. Her reflection shimmered faintly across the silver lettering. 6 years ago, Ethan called her emotional, weak, distracting. He told her she was becoming a burden during the biggest financial expansion of his life. And the cruelest part? He said it calmly. No screaming. No violence. Just cold ambition cutting through her heart, one sentence at a time. Charlotte looked at the clock. 7:14 p.m. The gala had already started. She could still stay home. Still protect herself from whatever game Ethan planned tonight. But then Lily walked over quietly and slipped her tiny hand into Charlotte's. You don't have to go if it hurts, she whispered. Charlotte nearly broke right there. Because children always sense pain, adults tried hiding. She knelt slowly in front of both twins and brushed Noah's hair back carefully. Listen to me, she said softly. No matter what happens tonight, you two are the best thing that ever happened to me. Noah smiled faintly. Lily hugged her instantly. Charlotte closed her eyes for one brief second. Then she stood, picked up her coat, and made the decision that would destroy Ethan Calloway's perfect evening forever. The black taxi rolled through the wet Sydney streets while neon reflections shimmered across the windows like broken pieces of another life Charlotte no longer recognized. Noah sat quietly beside her, holding Lily's hand while the city rushed past outside in streaks of gold and rain. Neither child spoke much now. The closer they got to the Crown Meridian Hotel, the heavier the silence became inside the cab. Charlotte kept smoothing invisible wrinkles from her dark green dress. An old formal gown she had altered herself 3 separate times over the years to make it look new again. The fabric was elegant enough under soft lighting, but beside the designer couture waiting inside that ballroom, she knew exactly what people would see. Not glamour. Survival. Noah suddenly leaned forward slightly. Mom. Charlotte looked at him. Yeah. Are we rich? The question caught her off guard so completely, she almost laughed. Almost. Why would you ask that? Noah shrugged. Oliver says rich people stay in places like this. Through the taxi window, the towering entrance of the Crown Meridian appeared ahead, glowing beneath massive crystal lights, while luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Men in tuxedos stepped onto red carpets beside women wrapped in diamonds and silk. Charlotte stared at the scene with a tightening chest. Once upon a time, she belonged in places like this beside Ethan. Back when she still believed love mattered more than ambition. Back before every conversation became about shareholders, meetings, acquisitions, and image. No, Charlotte answered gently. We are not rich. Lily looked up from her seat. But we are okay, right? Charlotte smiled softly despite the ache building in her throat. Yes, sweetheart. We are okay. The taxi stopped beneath the hotel awning. Rain whispered against the pavement while a valet hurried forward with an umbrella. The moment Charlotte stepped out, cold air wrapped around her shoulders. Cameras flashed nearby as another celebrity couple arrived at the entrance. Nobody noticed her yet. That almost felt worse somehow. Noah climbed out carefully holding his dinosaur while Lily adjusted her cardigan against the wind. The twins looked impossibly small beside the towering marble entrance. Charlotte reached for their hands instinctively. Stay close to me. Both children nodded. As they approached the main doors, Charlotte caught sight of herself reflected briefly in the polished glass. Blonde hair pinned neatly above tired blue eyes. Minimal makeup. Simple pearl earrings. A woman trying very hard not to look afraid. The ballroom doors opened. Warm golden lights spilled across the marble foyer while distant music floated through the air alongside laughter and clinking champagne glasses. And then everything changed. Heads turned almost immediately. Not dramatically at first. Just small glances. Recognition moving through the room, one whisper at a time. Is that Charlotte Hayes? Ethan's ex-wife. I thought she moved interstate. Wait, are those children with her? Charlotte felt every stare land against her skin like tiny needles. Wealthy people had a particular way of looking at others. Curiosity disguised as politeness. Judgment wrapped in expensive perfume. She kept walking anyway. Calm. Measured. Dignified. Noah squeezed her hand tighter. Mom. Charlotte leaned closer without slowing. You are okay. But across the ballroom, near the stage, Ethan Calloway had already seen her. Time stopped. Completely. The champagne glass in his hand lowered slowly while conversation faded into distant static around him. Charlotte stood near the ballroom entrance beneath the chandeliers with the twins beside her. For one impossible second, Ethan could not breathe properly. Lily looked like Charlotte. Soft blonde curls. Gentle eyes. But the boy, Ethan's entire body stiffened. Noah had his face. Not similar. Not close. The exact same eyes Ethan saw every morning in the mirror. The same jawline. The same serious expression. Even the way the child stood slightly protectively near his sister felt terrifyingly familiar. Ethan stared without blinking. Somewhere nearby, someone kept talking about investment portfolios, but the words no longer made sense. Claire noticed his expression immediately. "Sir?" Ethan did not answer. Noah turned his head slightly while scanning the ballroom nervously. And suddenly Ethan saw himself at 5 years old standing beside his own mother during endless corporate functions he never wanted to attend. The memory hit him so hard it physically hurt. "Impossible," Ethan muttered quietly. Claire frowned. "Sir?" Ethan ignored her completely. Charlotte finally noticed him standing across the ballroom. Their eyes met for the first time in 6 years. The impact was brutal. Ethan expected anger, bitterness, maybe shame, but Charlotte only looked tired. Tired in the way people looked after carrying too much alone for too long. The orchestra continued playing softly while guests slowly realized something deeply uncomfortable was unfolding beneath the glamorous surface of the evening. Ethan forced himself to move. One step, then another. Every executive nearby instinctively stepped aside as he crossed the ballroom floor toward Charlotte. The crowd parted naturally around him. Noah looked up at Charlotte nervously. "Is that him?" Charlotte swallowed once before answering softly. "Yeah." Ethan stopped only a few feet away. Up close, the resemblance became even worse. Noah's eyes lifted toward him curiously, while Lily hid slightly behind Charlotte's arm. Ethan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Charlotte watched him carefully. Calm on the outside, shaking underneath. Finally, Ethan managed to speak. "You brought children." The sentence sounded ridiculous the second it left his mouth. Charlotte's expression hardened slightly. "You invited me." A few nearby guests pretended not to listen while absolutely listening to every word. Ethan's eyes returned to Noah again, almost against his own will. "How old are they?" Charlotte hesitated, just enough for his stomach to drop. 5. Ethan felt the blood drain slowly from his face. 5. The timeline slammed into him with terrifying precision. 6 years ago. The divorce. The final months of their marriage. One last night together after a charity gala in Melbourne when they briefly pretended they still loved each other enough to survive. Ethan remembered all of it suddenly. Every detail. Charlotte saw the realization hit him in real time. His breathing changed first. Then his posture. Then the color disappeared from his expression completely. Noah studied Ethan carefully before asking the question nobody in the ballroom was prepared to hear. "Are you my dad?" Silence crashed across the room like shattered glass. The silence after Noah's question felt so heavy it almost bent the air around them. Even the orchestra faltered for half a second before awkwardly continuing the soft jazz arrangement near the stage. Ethan stared down at the little boy standing in front of him while every instinct inside his body screamed the same impossible truth. Noah had his eyes, his face, his posture. It was like looking at a memory that somehow stepped out of the past and into the middle of his perfect corporate gala. Ethan's throat tightened painfully. Around them, conversations died one by one as guests slowly realized this was no ordinary reunion between ex-spouses. Charlotte kept one hand resting protectively against Lily's shoulder while trying desperately to keep her expression calm. But inside, her heart was beating so violently she could feel it in her fingertips. Ethan finally looked at her again. "Answer him." His voice came out lower than before. Rougher somehow. Charlotte held his gaze for several seconds. "Yes," she said quietly. Ethan stopped breathing. Not metaphorically. Physically. The entire ballroom blurred around him for one disorienting second, while Noah continued watching him with innocent curiosity. Ethan's mind raced backward violently through 6 years of memories he had carefully buried beneath work, money, headlines, and boardrooms. The divorce papers. Charlotte crying in the kitchen while he answered emails during dinner. The final argument in their penthouse apartment overlooking Sydney Harbor. her voice breaking when she asked him if success was worth becoming emotionally unreachable, and him standing there cold and exhausted saying words he could never take back. I cannot keep choosing your feelings over my future. At the time, he believed he was being honest, efficient, practical. Now those words sounded monstrous inside his own head. Claire stepped closer carefully. Sir. Ethan barely heard her. His attention locked entirely onto the twins. Lily clung shyly to Charlotte, while Noah stood straighter beneath the pressure of dozens of strangers staring at him. The boy was trying to be brave. Ethan recognized that too, because it was exactly what he used to do as a child whenever adults made him uncomfortable. The realization cut deeper than he expected. One older investor near the Champagne Tower whispered loudly enough for others nearby to hear. My God, they are his. Another woman covered her mouth softly in shock. Charlotte noticed every whisper spreading through the ballroom like wildfire. Some faces showed sympathy, others curiosity. A few looked almost entertained. Wealthy people love drama, as long as it belonged to someone else. Ethan suddenly glanced around the room with growing irritation. Claire, he said sharply, clear this area. Sir. Now. Staff members immediately moved to redirect nearby guests toward the opposite side of the ballroom, but it was too late. Half the room had already seen everything. Ethan looked back at Charlotte again. You never told me. Charlotte let out one quiet breath through her nose. You never asked. The answer landed harder than shouting ever could. Ethan rubbed one hand across his jaw while struggling to steady himself. Charlotte, do not. Her voice remained calm, but the warning inside it was unmistakable. Noah looked between them uncertainly. Mom. Charlotte immediately softened. It is okay, sweetheart. But Ethan noticed the exhaustion beneath her composure now, the faint shadows beneath her eyes, the careful way she stood slightly in front of the children like she had spent years shielding them from disappointment. From him. Guilt hit Ethan so suddenly it almost made him dizzy. How long did you know? He asked quietly. Charlotte stared at him in disbelief for a moment. I found out 3 weeks after the divorce. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. 3 weeks. Dear God. He remembered that period perfectly. The Singapore expansion. 70-hour work weeks. Interviews. Investor dinners. Endless flights. He had been too consumed by his own ambition to notice his marriage collapsing in real time. Why did you not contact me? Ethan asked. Charlotte actually laughed softly at that. Not humor. Pain. Contact you. Her blue eyes sharpened for the first time that evening. You changed your private number. Your assistant screened every email. Your lawyers made it very clear you wanted a clean separation. Ethan looked away immediately because every word was true. Back then, emotional distance felt easier than grief. Easier than admitting he failed the one relationship that mattered. Lily suddenly tugged gently on Charlotte's sleeve. Mom, everybody keeps staring. The small, frightened tremor in her daughter's voice shattered something inside Charlotte instantly. She knelt beside both twins and brushed Lily's curls back gently. Hey. Her voice became warm and soft again. Look at me. Noah and Lily both focused on her immediately. You have done nothing wrong. Okay. Noah nodded once. Lily copied him. Ethan watched the moment silently, while an unfamiliar ache spread through his chest. Charlotte was good with them. Patient. Present. Everything he had once promised he would become before money slowly consumed every corner of his life. Noah glanced back toward Ethan carefully. Did you really not know about us? Ethan swallowed hard. No, the honesty in his voice surprised even himself. Noah seemed to study his face seriously before asking another devastating question. Would you have wanted us? Charlotte shut her eyes briefly. Ethan looked completely unprepared for the impact of that sentence. The little boy's expression stayed calm, but the vulnerability underneath nearly destroyed him. Ethan crouched slowly until he was closer to Noah's height. Expensive tuxedo against polished marble floor. One of the richest men in Australia suddenly looking painfully human for the first time in years. Yes, Ethan said quietly. I would have wanted you. Noah's face did not fully change, but something inside the child softened slightly. Lily remained more cautious. Ethan noticed that too. Charlotte stood again carefully while tension tightened across her shoulders. The children are tired, she said. We should leave. Panic flashed briefly across Ethan's face before he could hide it. Wait. Charlotte looked at him. For what? Ethan opened his mouth. Nothing coherent came out. Because how exactly did a man recover from discovering he missed the first 5 years of his children's lives? While standing under crystal chandeliers beside a champagne fountain. Around them, the gala continued awkwardly like an orchestra playing during a shipwreck. Ethan looked at the twins one more time, then at Charlotte. And for the first time in 6 years, the powerful CEO who controlled billion-dollar negotiations felt completely powerless. The ballroom lights suddenly felt too bright for Ethan Calloway. Every crystal reflection off the chandeliers stabbed against his eyes, while conversations resumed in awkward fragments around the room. Somewhere near the stage, executives forced nervous laughter over untouched champagne, pretending the evening had not just split open in front of them. Ethan barely noticed any of it. His entire world had narrowed down to one woman and 2 children standing a few feet away from him. Charlotte adjusted Lily's cardigan gently while Noah stayed close beside her, still studying Ethan with cautious curiosity. The twins looked exhausted now. It was nearly 9 o'clock, far past the hour children should have been dragged into an adult ballroom, filled with strangers and whispered tension. Guilt settled heavier inside Ethan's chest with every passing second. He had invited Charlotte here expecting satisfaction. Some cruel part of him wanted her to see the empire he built after the divorce. The success, the influence, the proof that he thrived without her. Instead, she arrived carrying the one thing money could never rebuild once lost. Time. Claire stepped closer again, lowering her voice carefully. Sir, the board members are asking if you still plan to make the anniversary speech. Ethan looked at her blankly for a second, as if he had forgotten the gala even existed. Cancel it. Claire blinked. Sir, I said cancel it. The sharpness in his tone silenced her immediately. Across the ballroom, several executives exchanged uneasy glances. Ethan never canceled public appearances. Not for anything. But tonight, the billionaire CEO who controlled billion-dollar negotiations looked like a man barely holding himself together beneath his tailored tuxedo. Charlotte noticed it too. That almost made her angrier somehow. Because where was this? Emotional honesty 6 years ago when she begged him to care? Ethan looked back at her carefully. Can we talk privately? Charlotte hesitated. Every instinct told her refusing would be safer. Cleaner. But Noah and Lily were already staring between them with quiet confusion. Children sensed unfinished things faster than adults ever admitted. Finally, Charlotte nodded once. 5 minutes. Ethan immediately turned toward Claire. Find somewhere quiet. Claire recovered quickly and motioned toward a private lounge beside the ballroom reserved for senior investors. Ethan guided them through the crowd while whispers followed behind like smoke. Charlotte kept her chin lifted despite feeling every stare burning into her back. Some guests looked sympathetic now, others fascinated. But the most uncomfortable expressions came from the older executives who suddenly realized Ethan Calloway's flawless public image might not be as flawless as they believed. The private lounge overlooked Sydney Harbor through enormous glass windows streaked with rain. Soft piano music drifted faintly through hidden speakers while low amber lighting reflected across polished wood tables. Ethan closed the door behind them carefully. The moment the noise of the ballroom disappeared, the silence inside the room became almost unbearable. Noah wandered toward the window slowly, staring out at the glowing city lights while Lily climbed onto one of the velvet chairs beside Charlotte. Ethan remained standing for a moment like he no longer trusted his own legs. Finally, he spoke quietly. Why did you never tell them about me? Charlotte looked at him in disbelief. You think I spent 5 years poisoning our children against you? Ethan rubbed one hand across the back of his neck tiredly. I do not know what to think right now. Charlotte folded her arms tightly. Then maybe imagine how I felt raising twins alone while you appeared on magazine covers talking about discipline and sacrifice. Ethan flinched slightly. Not outwardly, but enough for her to notice. Rain tapped softly against the giant windows behind Noah, while Sydney glittered below them in gold and white reflections. Lily swung her feet nervously beneath the chair before looking toward Ethan. Did you really not know we existed? Ethan's expression changed instantly when she spoke directly to him. Softer. Sadder. No, sweetheart, he answered honestly. I did not know. Lily studied his face carefully, as if searching for lies. Charlotte noticed Ethan kneel slightly beside her chair, so he would not tower over the children. The gesture surprised her. Ethan had always been good with children once upon a time, before work consumed everything. before ambition replaced tenderness. Noah finally turned away from the harbor view. Mom says you are very busy. Ethan swallowed slowly. Your mom is right. Noah nodded thoughtfully. She is busy too. The simple statement landed harder than criticism ever could. Ethan glanced toward Charlotte instinctively. Her eyes looked tired again beneath the soft lounge lighting. Not weak, just worn down by years of carrying responsibility without help. Ethan suddenly noticed small details he had missed earlier in the ballroom. The careful stitching near the sleeve of Noah's blazer. Lily's shoes slightly scuffed at the toes. Charlotte's dress beautifully maintained, but clearly old. None of them looked neglected. Charlotte would never allow that. But they looked real. Human. Nothing like the polished perfection surrounding his corporate world. Ethan lowered himself slowly into the chair opposite Charlotte. How hard was it? The question came quietly, almost afraid of the answer. Charlotte stared at him for several seconds before responding. Hard enough that I stopped counting. Ethan looked down at his hands. Hands that signed mergers, built skyscrapers, controlled entire markets, yet somehow failed the people sitting directly in front of him. I would have helped, he said weakly. Charlotte's eyes sharpened immediately. Would you? Ethan met her gaze. Yes. Even back then, she asked softly. Back when your assistant used to cancel our anniversary dinners because investors flew in unexpectedly? Ethan looked away first. Because the truth hurt. Charlotte stood slowly and walked toward the windows overlooking the harbor. The city lights reflected across the glass. Around her silhouette, while rain blurred the skyline beyond. You know what the worst part was? She asked quietly. Ethan remained silent. Not the money. Not the exhaustion. Not even being alone. Her voice trembled slightly for the first time all evening. The worst part was watching them ask why everybody else had a father except them. Ethan shut his eyes briefly. Noah moved closer to Charlotte instinctively, while Lily remained curled quietly in the chair. Ethan suddenly realized something horrifying. These children had spent years building emotional walls around a missing father they never even met. And he had spent those same years believing success made loneliness worthwhile. Charlotte turned back toward him slowly. Her blue eyes glistened under the soft amber lights, but she refused to cry. You invited me here tonight because you thought I was the one who lost after the divorce. Ethan looked physically ill now. Charlotte's voice stayed calm, controlled, almost gentle, which somehow made every word hurt more. But while you were building your empire, Ethan, she glanced toward the twins beside her. I was building a family. The words stayed suspended in the private lounge long after Charlotte stopped speaking. Outside the enormous glass windows, rain continued sliding slowly across the Sydney skyline, while ferries moved through the dark harbor below like floating lights. Ethan sat motionless in the velvet chair across from her, staring at the woman he once believed he understood completely. But the Charlotte standing in front of him tonight was not the same woman who cried beside him in their penthouse kitchen 6 years ago, begging him to come home before midnight for once. This version of Charlotte had survived things alone. Quietly. The difference showed in her eyes. Noah climbed onto the sofa beside Lily while exhaustion slowly replaced the nervous tension in both children's faces. It had been a long evening for them. Too many strangers. Too many questions. Too many emotions children should never have to carry. Ethan noticed Lily rubbing her eyes tiredly and instinctively reached for the small tray of bottled water sitting untouched on the coffee table. Do you want some water? He asked gently. Lily looked immediately toward Charlotte first. Ethan caught the reflex, and something inside him twisted painfully. The little girl needed permission before trusting him. Charlotte gave a small nod. That is okay. Ethan unscrewed the bottle carefully and handed it to Lily with slow, deliberate movements like he was afraid of startling her. Thank you, Lily whispered politely. Ethan almost smiled despite the ache crushing his chest. You are welcome. Noah watched the exchange carefully before speaking again. Mom says I have your eyes. Ethan looked toward him. She is right. Noah seemed oddly satisfied by that answer. He leaned back against the sofa holding his dinosaur while studying Ethan openly now. Do you like dinosaurs? Ethan blinked once. The question felt so innocent compared to the emotional wreckage surrounding them that it nearly broke him. When I was your age, I loved them. Noah's expression brightened slightly. My favorite is a stegosaurus. Ethan nodded slowly. Good choice. Charlotte watched the interaction silently from near the windows. Her emotions twisted painfully inside her chest. Part of her wanted to hate Ethan completely for missing 5 years of birthdays, fevers, school concerts, nightmares, and bedtime stories. But another part remembered this version of him too. The softer version buried beneath deadlines and ambition. The man who used to stop his car during rainstorms to help strangers change flat tires. The man who once spent 3 hours building a bookshelf for her tiny apartment before they married because she casually mentioned she could not afford one. Success had not created Ethan's kindness. It had only buried it under layers of pressure and ego until nobody could reach him anymore. Ethan looked toward Charlotte carefully. Are they healthy? The question sounded almost fragile. Charlotte nodded once. Yes. Ethan let out a quiet breath of relief. No complications during the pregnancy? Charlotte looked down briefly before answering. I was placed on bed rest at 31 weeks. Ethan's face tightened immediately. Why? Stress, Charlotte answered honestly. Guilt moved visibly across his expression. You went through that alone? Charlotte gave a faint, tired smile without humor. Most women do not exactly receive emotional support from divorce lawyers. Ethan looked down at the floor again. Every answer seemed to reveal another failure he never even realized existed. Claire knocked softly before entering the lounge, carrying a tablet against her chest. She immediately sensed the emotional heaviness inside the room and lowered her voice instinctively. Sir, several media outlets are asking questions downstairs. Ethan's jaw tightened. Of course they were. Sydney business reporters could smell scandal faster than sharks smelled blood. Handle it, he said quietly. Claire hesitated. There are photographs already circulating online. Charlotte closed her eyes briefly. Perfect. Exactly what she never wanted. Noah frowned slightly. Why are people taking photos of us? Ethan answered before Charlotte could. Because sometimes adults forget how to behave properly. Noah accepted the explanation with surprising seriousness. Claire shifted awkwardly before looking toward Charlotte. Ms. Hayes, I just wanted to say, she hesitated carefully. I am sorry. Charlotte looked mildly surprised. Claire lowered her eyes slightly. Back then, I should have tried harder to reach you. Ethan looked up sharply. What does that mean? Claire froze. The room suddenly became very still. Charlotte crossed her arms slowly. Claire, a warning. Too late. Claire looked visibly uncomfortable now. There were messages, she admitted quietly. Ethan's entire posture stiffened. What messages? Claire swallowed. After the divorce, Charlotte tried contacting your office several times. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. You told me she never called. Claire looked miserable. I thought she was emotional and trying to interfere during the Singapore negotiations. Charlotte let out one hollow laugh under her breath. There it was. The missing piece. Ethan stood slowly. You blocked her calls? Claire's eyes filled with panic immediately. Sir, I was protecting the company. Ethan looked genuinely shaken now. You decided whether my wife could reach me? Ex-wife, Claire corrected softly before instantly regretting it. Ethan turned away sharply, running one hand through his hair while anger and guilt collided violently inside him. Charlotte watched him carefully. Do not blame her for everything. Ethan looked back at her. She hid my children from me. Charlotte's expression hardened instantly. No, Ethan. Your company hid me from you because everyone around you learned very quickly that emotions were inconvenient to your career. The truth hit with brutal precision. Ethan remembered those years now with horrifying clarity. Every assistant trained to filter distractions. Every conversation reduced to efficiency. Every personal conflict delayed until it disappeared. He built an empire so obsessed with control that eventually even love needed administrative approval to reach him. Noah suddenly yawned loudly from the sofa, immediately embarrassed afterward. Lily looked half asleep beside him. Charlotte walked toward them softly. We really should go. Panic flashed across Ethan's face again. Wait. Charlotte looked at him carefully. Ethan hesitated before speaking quietly. Can I see them again? The question sounded nothing like a billionaire CEO. No confidence. No authority. Just fear. Real fear. Charlotte studied his face for a long moment while rain shimmered across the harbor behind them. Then Noah answered first. I think Mom should decide. Ethan looked toward his son slowly. And somehow that simple sentence humbled him more than every public humiliation earlier that night. Charlotte looked at Noah for a long moment after his quiet answer filled the private lounge. The little boy sat curled beside his sister holding the worn plastic dinosaur in his lap, while rain continued drifting across the giant windows behind them. He did not sound angry. That was somehow worse. Children who grew up around disappointment learned caution too early. Ethan remained standing near the sofa, waiting for Charlotte's response with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Uncertainty. Real uncertainty. 6 years ago, Ethan Calloway always sounded sure of everything. Markets, investments, strategy, decisions. Even their divorce had felt like another business calculation he already accepted before she entered the room. But tonight he looked like a man standing in unfamiliar territory without a map. Charlotte finally answered carefully. I do not know what happens after tonight. Ethan nodded once slowly. He accepted the honesty because he had not earned anything more. Lily yawned again and leaned sleepily against Noah's shoulder. Ethan noticed immediately. They should get home. Charlotte glanced at the clock on the wall. Nearly 10 o'clock. The twins had school in the morning. Real life still existed outside this emotional storm. Yes, she said quietly. Ethan reached for his jacket automatically. I will have my driver take you. Charlotte shook her head instantly. That is not necessary. Charlotte. His tone softened. Please. She hesitated. Pride and exhaustion fought silently inside her chest. Then Noah spoke up quietly. The taxi smelled weird. Lily nodded half asleep. Ethan almost smiled despite everything. My car smells normal, I promise. Noah studied him seriously before giving one small approving nod. The moment felt strangely ordinary. Painfully ordinary. Like a version of family life that should have existed years ago. Ethan grabbed an umbrella from beside the lounge door while Charlotte helped Lily into her coat. Claire quietly disappeared without another word, understanding this moment no longer belonged to corporate schedules or public relations. As they stepped back into the corridor outside the ballroom, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. News traveled quickly among wealthy circles. Conversations hushed as people spotted them walking together. Some guests looked embarrassed now, others openly curious. Ethan ignored every stare. For once in his life, public image felt meaningless compared to the children walking beside him. A woman near the Champagne Tower whispered something cruel under her breath about secret families, but Ethan stopped walking immediately. The entire corridor froze. He turned slowly toward the woman, his expression cold enough to silence half the room. If anybody here speaks about my children disrespectfully again, he said quietly, you will never attend another Calloway event for the rest of your life. Silence crashed down instantly. The woman's face drained of color. Ethan turned away before she could answer. Charlotte stared at him in surprise while Noah walked slightly closer beside him now. Something subtle had shifted. Outside the hotel entrance, cold rain drifted through the Sydney night while luxury cars lined the circular driveway beneath glowing lights. Ethan opened the umbrella above Charlotte and the twins automatically before guiding them toward a sleek black Mercedes waiting near the curb. The driver stepped out immediately. Evening, Mr. Calloway. Ethan opened the rear door himself. Parramatta. The driver nodded once. Noah climbed inside first while Lily nearly fell asleep against Charlotte's shoulder. Ethan watched Charlotte carefully as she adjusted the children's seatbelts. Even exhausted, she still checked everything twice. That same protective instinct again. The drive through the city felt strangely intimate despite the silence. Rain streaked softly across the windows while Sydney glittered outside in reflections of neon and traffic lights. Noah sat beside Ethan now instead of across from him. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to study him openly. Ethan pretended not to notice at first. Then Noah finally asked quietly, what does a chief executive officer actually do? Charlotte closed her eyes briefly in exhaustion. Of course, that would be the first question. Ethan looked toward Noah carefully. Mostly meetings. Noah frowned. That sounds boring. Ethan laughed softly before he could stop himself. A real laugh. The sound startled even him. Sometimes it is. Noah seemed pleased by that answer. Mom works a lot too. Ethan glanced toward Charlotte. What do you do now? Charlotte hesitated before answering. I manage accounts for a small construction company. Ethan stared at her for a second. You went back into finance. I was good at it before life became complicated. The quiet bitterness underneath the sentence did not escape him. Ethan remembered exactly how talented she used to be. Sharp with numbers. Calm under pressure. Smarter than half the analysts he hired. He also remembered encouraging her to leave her own career behind temporarily after they married because his schedule had become too demanding for two ambitious people. Dear God, The memories sounded uglier tonight. Lily shifted sleepily against Charlotte's shoulder. Mom. Yes, sweetheart. Can we get pancakes tomorrow? Charlotte smiled faintly. It is a school day. Many pancakes. Charlotte laughed softly this time. Maybe. Ethan listened silently. Such a small conversation. Such ordinary tenderness. He had missed all of it. First words. Favorite cartoons. Lost teeth. School lunches. Bedtime routines. 5 years reduced to stories he would never fully recover. The car eventually turned onto a quieter street above the bakery where Charlotte lived. Rainwater glistened beneath streetlights while old terrace buildings lined the road. Ethan stared out the window as realization settled heavily inside him. This was where his children grew up. Not penthouses. Not luxury estates. Here, above a bakery with flickering lights and narrow staircases. The Mercedes stopped beside the curb. Ethan stepped out first and opened the umbrella again while Charlotte carefully woke Lily. Noah climbed out holding his dinosaur under one arm. The smell of fresh bread drifted faintly through the cool night air. Charlotte turned toward Ethan awkwardly beneath the rain. Thank you for the ride. Ethan looked up at the modest building, then back at her. Charlotte, she waited quietly. Ethan struggled for the right words and failed. I do not know how to fix this. Charlotte's expression softened for the first time that evening. Not forgiveness, just honesty. You cannot fix 5 years overnight. Ethan nodded slowly. Because she was right. Noah suddenly tugged gently on Ethan's sleeve. Ethan looked down immediately. Yeah, mate. Noah hesitated before speaking quietly. You can come to my football game on Saturday if you want. The world stopped again. Charlotte stared at Noah in shock, while Ethan looked completely unprepared for the invitation. The little boy shrugged awkwardly. If you are not busy with meetings. Ethan felt his throat tighten. Painfully. I am not busy, he answered immediately. Noah gave one small nod like that settled everything. Then he took Charlotte's hand and walked toward the building entrance beside Lily. Ethan stood alone in the rain watching the three of them disappear upstairs while something inside his chest cracked open completely. Because for the first time in years, success no longer felt like winning. Ethan did not sleep that night. The penthouse overlooking Sydney Harbor felt unbearably silent after midnight, while rain continued tapping softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Normally the view calmed him. The city lights. The orderly movement of ferries below. The illusion that everything in life could be controlled if someone worked hard enough. But tonight the silence inside the apartment felt wrong. Hollow. Ethan loosened his tie and walked slowly through rooms worth millions of dollars that suddenly seemed far too large for one person. He passed the formal dining table where he once ignored Charlotte through entire meals while answering investor emails. Past the piano she used to play before she stopped touching it altogether during the final year of their marriage. Past framed magazine covers celebrating his success, while his personal life quietly collapsed behind closed doors. The memories hit differently now because he finally understood what they cost. Ethan poured himself a glass of water around 1:30 in the morning and stopped when he noticed something near the back shelf of the kitchen cabinet. A tiny ceramic mug with faded yellow stars painted across the side. Charlotte bought it during their honeymoon in Queensland because she claimed expensive coffee tasted better in childish mugs. Ethan stared at it for a long moment. He never threw it away. Somehow, through 6 years, assistants cleaning the penthouse, renovations, and endless routines, the little mug remained hidden in the cabinet untouched. Like a memory too stubborn to disappear completely. Ethan sat alone in the dark kitchen, turning the mug slowly between his hands while Noah's voice repeated endlessly inside his head. Are you my dad? No accusation. No anger. Just hope mixed. Carefully with uncertainty. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Dear God. His children learned to ask life-changing questions politely because they were afraid of bothering people. The realization physically hurt. Across the city in Parramatta, Charlotte finally managed to get the twins asleep nearly an hour after returning home. Noah kept asking quiet questions from beneath his blanket while Lily curled against Charlotte's side fighting exhaustion. Do you think he liked us? Lily whispered sleepily. Charlotte brushed soft curls away from her daughter's forehead. Yes, sweetheart. Noah stared at the ceiling from the small bed across the room. He looked sad. Charlotte paused. Maybe he was. Noah thought about that seriously. Can grown-ups miss people they never met before? Charlotte felt tears threaten unexpectedly. She looked away toward the rain-speckled window before answering softly. Sometimes. Eventually, both children drifted asleep beneath the warm glow of the small bedside lamp. Charlotte remained sitting quietly between their beds long afterward, listening to the steady rhythm of their breathing. She should have felt victorious tonight. Ethan finally understood what he lost. The powerful CEO who once made her feel invisible stood shattered in front of an entire ballroom. So why did her chest still ache? Because deep down, some dangerous part of her never stopped loving the version of Ethan that existed before ambition consumed him. And that terrified her more than anything. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright after 2 straight days of rain. Ethan stood beside his wardrobe longer than necessary, staring at rows of expensive tailored suits before finally choosing dark jeans and a navy jumper instead. Somehow arriving at a children's football match dressed like a corporate press conference felt ridiculous. He checked his watch again. 8:14 a.m. The game started at 9. Ethan had already canceled 2 investor calls, ignored 17 emails, and shocked his executive assistant by refusing a breakfast meeting with international shareholders. Claire still looked traumatized when he left the office early Friday afternoon. "Sir," she asked carefully before. He walked out. "Are you sure postponing the Singapore call is wise?" Ethan answered without slowing down. "No." Then after a pause, "But neither was losing my family." Claire said nothing after that. The local football grounds sat beside a public school near Parramatta Park. Nothing glamorous. Just slightly uneven grass fields, tired aluminium benches, and parents carrying takeaway coffees beneath bright winter sunlight. Ethan parked his Mercedes beside a muddy fence already crowded with ordinary family cars and immediately noticed how out of place he looked. Nobody here cared about billion-dollar investment firms. Parents were focused on folding chairs, sunscreen, and making sure children remembered their water bottles. Ethan stood awkwardly near the sidelines holding 2 takeaway hot chocolates because he panicked in the cafe queue and bought extra drinks without thinking properly. Then he spotted Noah first. The little boy wore an oversized green football jersey while racing across the field laughing with teammates. Ethan stopped moving entirely. He had never seen his son laugh before. Really laugh. The sound carried across the crisp morning air while Noah chased another child through the grass with reckless excitement. Lily sat nearby wrapped in a pink jacket beside Charlotte on the aluminium benches. Charlotte noticed Ethan almost immediately. Her expression tightened slightly in surprise. Ethan walked toward them carefully. "Hi." Charlotte glanced down at the 2 hot chocolates in his hands. "You brought supplies." Ethan looked mildly embarrassed. "I did not know if children liked coffee yet." Lily giggled instantly. Ethan relaxed slightly at the sound. "One is chocolate." Lily accepted it with both hands like a treasure. "Thank you." Ethan sat cautiously at the far end of the bench while parents nearby continued chatting without recognizing him. For once in years, nobody cared who he was. He found the anonymity strangely comforting. On the field, Noah suddenly spotted Ethan watching from the sidelines. The little boy froze for 1 second before his entire face lit up. "He came." Noah shouted toward another teammate with the kind of joy Ethan felt directly in his chest. Then Noah waved so enthusiastically he nearly dropped the football. Ethan waved back awkwardly while something warm and painful unfolded inside him all at once. Charlotte noticed it too. The emotion on Ethan's face looked almost fragile beneath the morning sunlight. Noah sprinted toward the sidelines moments later, breathing hard. "You actually came." Ethan nodded slowly. "I said I would." Noah grinned. "Most dads leave after 1 game." Ethan's expression shifted instantly. "I am not leaving after 1 game." The words came out before he fully thought about them. But the moment he said them, he realized he meant every single one. The football field smelled like damp grass and coffee cups warming cold hands beneath the winter sun. Parents shouted encouragement from folding chairs while children chased the ball across uneven patches of muddy ground with the chaotic energy only 5-year-olds possessed. Ethan sat quietly beside Charlotte on the aluminium bench holding a paper cup that had already gone cold in his hands. He had attended charity galas in Monaco, billion-dollar conferences in Singapore, and private investor retreats in Switzerland. Yet somehow this small suburban football match felt more important than all of them combined. Noah sprinted across the field with fierce determination, completely unaware that every movement pulled Ethan's attention like gravity. The boy missed an easy pass and groaned dramatically while another child accidentally kicked mud onto his socks. Ethan smiled before he could stop himself. He is competitive, he murmured. Charlotte glanced toward him. You should see him during board games. Ethan laughed softly again. The sound still felt unfamiliar after years of living inside corporate silence and calculated conversations. Lily sat between them, swinging her legs while carefully sipping hot chocolate through a straw. Every few minutes, she looked up at Ethan curiously, as if slowly deciding whether he belonged in their world yet. Ethan noticed her staring eventually. What? Lily hesitated shyly. You look different without the suit. Charlotte nearly choked on her coffee, trying not to laugh. Ethan looked genuinely thoughtful about the observation. Is that good or bad? Lily tilted her head seriously. Better. Ethan smiled slowly. Charlotte looked away toward the football field before he noticed how much that smile still affected her after all these years. A whistle blew loudly across the park as Noah's team scored their first goal. The little boy threw both hands into the air before immediately searching the sidelines. The moment he spotted Ethan clapping, Noah's entire face lit up with pride. Ethan felt something shift painfully inside his chest again. Such a small thing. One child looking for approval from his father. But Noah reacted like attention itself was precious. Charlotte watched the interaction carefully. He notices when people show up, she said quietly. Ethan understood the deeper meaning immediately. Children remembered absence more than adults realized. Noah jogged toward the sidelines during halftime, flushed pink from running. Did you see my pass? Ethan nodded. That was brilliant. Noah grinned and sat directly beside him without hesitation this time. Mud stained the knees of his football shorts while his blonde hair stuck messily to his forehead. Ethan handed him a bottle of water automatically before realizing how natural the gesture felt. Noah accepted it without thinking twice. Lily leaned closer beside Charlotte. Mom, yeah, I think he likes us. Charlotte's throat tightened unexpectedly. Ethan heard the whisper too. He looked down at the grass for a second because he could not trust his expression. Nearby, another parent suddenly approached the bench carrying a folding chair under one arm. Sorry, the man said casually to Ethan. You know his dad? Ethan froze for half a heartbeat. Such an ordinary question. No headlines. No business titles. Just fatherhood spoken plainly beneath morning sunlight. Ethan glanced briefly toward Noah before answering quietly. Yeah. Noah smiled so brightly beside him that Ethan nearly lost the ability to speak entirely. The other parent nodded toward the field. Good little player you have there. Ethan looked at Noah again. I know. The simple conversation should not have mattered so much. But Ethan spent years being called successful, powerful, visionary, influential. None of those words had ever sounded as meaningful as Noah's dad. The second half of the match started shortly afterward. Noah ran back onto the field full of energy, while Lily eventually curled against Charlotte's side beneath the winter sun. Ethan sat quietly for several minutes before speaking again. I missed his first game, did I not? Charlotte kept watching the field. You missed all of them. No anger in her voice now. Just truth. Ethan nodded slowly. Did he cry the first time? Charlotte smiled faintly at the memory, despite herself. No. He marched onto the field like he was entering the World Cup final. Ethan laughed softly under his breath. That sounds familiar. Charlotte finally glanced at him properly. He gets that confidence from you. Ethan looked surprised by the statement. Not from you. Charlotte shook her head slightly. I was terrified of everything at his age. Ethan studied her face quietly beneath the pale sunlight. You still came to my gala knowing everyone there would judge you. Charlotte looked back toward the field immediately. That was different. No, Ethan said gently. It was not. The words lingered between them while cold wind drifted across the park, carrying distant traffic sounds and children's laughter. For the first time in years, conversation between them no longer felt like war. Just two tired people standing in the aftermath of old mistakes neither fully knew how to repair yet. Then Ethan's phone vibrated sharply inside his jacket pocket. He glanced at the screen automatically. International Investor Conference. Urgent. Another call immediately followed. Then another. Charlotte noticed his expression change. You should answer that. Ethan looked at the phone for several seconds while Noah raced across the field, chasing the ball with complete concentration. Then Ethan pressed the power button and turned the phone completely off. Charlotte stared at him in shock. Ethan, He slipped the dark screen back into his pocket. I spent 6 years answering every call except the ones that mattered. Charlotte looked away quickly because something about the quiet honesty in his voice hurt more than arrogance ever did. On the field, Noah suddenly tripped while trying to kick the ball and landed hard in the grass. Several parents gasped softly. Before Charlotte could even stand, Ethan was already moving. He reached Noah in seconds and crouched beside him immediately. "Hey, mate. You okay?" Noah blinked, rapidly fighting tears mostly out of embarrassment. "I missed the kick." Ethan brushed dirt gently off the boy's sleeve. "That happens." Noah looked devastated anyway. Ethan lowered his voice slightly. "You know something?" Noah sniffed. "What?" Ethan smiled faintly. "The best players in the world still fall over sometimes." Noah stared at him uncertainly. "Really?" "Absolutely. I have seen grown men worth hundreds of millions cry over football." Noah laughed despite himself. Ethan held out his hand. "Come on. Your team still needs you." Noah grabbed his hand immediately and stood back up smiling again. Charlotte watched from the sidelines while emotion tightened painfully in her chest. Because the man helping their son back onto the field looked nothing like the cold CEO she divorced 6 years ago. And that scared her almost as much as losing him once already. The final whistle echoed across the football grounds beneath pale winter sunlight, while children burst into exhausted cheers and parents clapped from the sidelines with steaming coffee cups in their hands. Noah's team had technically lost by 2 goals, but judging from the celebration happening near the muddy field, nobody under the age of 10 seemed particularly devastated about it. Noah sprinted toward Ethan immediately after the game ended, grass stains covering both knees of his shorts while sweat dampened his blonde hair. "Did you see my tackle?" he asked breathlessly. Ethan smiled despite himself. "I did." Noah grinned proudly. "Coach said I was fearless." Ethan crouched slightly beside him. "You are." The simple praise made Noah stand taller instantly. Charlotte watched quietly from a few steps away while Lily held her hand beside the benches. Something dangerous was happening in front of her eyes. The children were already attaching themselves emotionally to Ethan faster than she expected. And the worst part? Ethan was attaching himself right back. After the match, families slowly drifted toward a nearby cafe beside the park, while children chased each other through the grass with jackets half-zipped and muddy shoes. Noah looked up hopefully at Charlotte. "Can we go too?" Charlotte hesitated automatically. The responsible answer should have been no. Boundaries. Distance. Time to think. But then Lily tugged gently on her sleeve. "Please." Ethan stayed silent beside them, almost careful not to influence the decision too strongly. That restraint alone surprised Charlotte more than anything. 6 years ago, Ethan used to control every room without realizing it. Now he looked like a man terrified of pushing too hard and losing something fragile. Finally, Charlotte nodded once. "One hot chocolate. Then home." Noah cheered quietly like he had won a championship. The small cafe smelled like toasted banana bread and fresh espresso, while local parents crowded around tiny wooden tables balancing takeaway cups and football bags. Nobody treated Ethan like a billionaire here. One exhausted father accidentally bumped into him near the counter without recognizing him and muttered a distracted apology while carrying for babusinos. Ethan almost looked relieved by the normalcy of it. They found a table near the window where sunlight spilled across scratched timber floors. Noah sat beside Ethan again automatically this time, while Lily curled close against Charlotte with her hot chocolate held carefully between both hands. Ethan studied the children openly now, no longer hiding the fascination and grief tangled together inside him. Every small thing mattered because every small thing was new to him. The way Noah stirred whipped cream aggressively before drinking. The way Lily quietly removed marshmallows first because she saved the best bit for last. Ethan had missed years of these tiny details. Charlotte noticed him watching the children with an almost painful focus. "You do not have to memorize everything at once," she said quietly. Ethan looked at her over the rim of his coffee cup. "I'm trying to catch up on 5 years." Charlotte's chest tightened unexpectedly. Noah interrupted before the silence could deepen. "Do you know how to draw sharks?" Ethan blinked. "Poorly." Noah immediately grabbed a napkin and pushed crayons across the table. "Show me." Ethan looked genuinely uncertain. "Mate, I run an investment firm. I do not think shark drawing is part of my skill set." Noah shrugged. "You can still try." Charlotte watched in stunned silence as Ethan Calloway, one of the most intimidating businessmen in Australia, spent the next 10 minutes drawing terrible sharks with a blue crayon, while two 5-year-olds corrected him seriously. Lily laughed so hard at one point, she nearly spilled her drink. "That looks like a sad dolphin," she giggled. Ethan stared at his drawing with mock offense. "I was going for aggressive predator." "It looks emotional," Noah declared. Ethan actually laughed out loud at that. A deep, genuine laugh that turned heads around the cafe mostly because happiness looked so unfamiliar on him. Charlotte looked down at her coffee quickly because something about seeing him like this hurt in a completely different way now. This was the version of Ethan she once imagined raising children with. Warm, patient, present. Not the exhausted corporate machine their marriage slowly became. Her phone buzzed suddenly against the table. Charlotte glanced down. Work. 3 missed messages from her manager asking if she could cover additional payroll reports by Monday morning. Ethan noticed her expression shift immediately. "Everything okay?" Charlotte forced a small nod. "Just work." Noah frowned. "You work too much." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." Noah looked completely sincere. "You fall asleep on the sofa sometimes." Ethan's attention snapped towards Charlotte instantly. She looked away. "That is not important." But Ethan heard the exhaustion hidden underneath the sentence. He noticed it everywhere now. The careful budgeting, the extra hours, the tiredness she carried even while smiling for the children. Guilt settled heavier inside him with every passing hour. Eventually, the cafe began emptying as families headed home. Noah and Lily stood near the window watching. Birds hop across the pavement outside while Charlotte gathered scarves and drink cups. Ethan reached for his wallet automatically at the counter, but Charlotte stopped him with one look. "No," Ethan paused. "Charlotte, you do not get to buy your way into fatherhood." The words landed quietly but firmly. Ethan stared at her for a moment before slowly putting the wallet away again. "Fair." Charlotte softened slightly because he accepted the boundary without argument. Growth. Actual growth. That almost scared her more than arrogance would have. Outside the cafe, cold wind swept through the park, carrying the smell of wet grass and eucalyptus trees. Noah walked between Ethan and Charlotte, while Lily rode sleepily on Charlotte's hip after growing tired from the morning excitement. The scene looked dangerously close to normal family life. Ethan felt it too. A strange ache settled in his chest watching shadows stretch across the pavement beside them. For figures instead of one. Noah suddenly reached up and grabbed Ethan's hand naturally, while talking about football cards without even realizing what he had done. Ethan froze for half a second before carefully holding the small hand back. Charlotte saw the exact moment emotion hit him. His entire expression changed. Not dramatic, just quiet devastation mixed with wonder. Because after years spent shaking hands with politicians, investors, and celebrities, nothing in Ethan Callaway's life had ever felt as important as a 5-year-old boy choosing to hold his hand willingly. Monday morning arrived gray and cold over Sydney while Ethan stood inside the executive boardroom of Callaway staring through 40 floors of glass at a city he suddenly no longer recognized the same way. The polished conference table stretched beneath designer lighting while senior investors waited around him with tablets, financial reports, and impatient expressions. Normally, Ethan controlled rooms like this effortlessly. Precision, focus, authority. But today he had already reread the same merger document 3 times without absorbing a single word. Because somewhere across the city, Noah and Lily were probably sitting in a classroom, learning spelling words and eating packed lunches Charlotte prepared before sunrise. Real life. His children had real lives entirely separate from him. The thought still felt unreal. "Ethan," one board member prompted carefully. Ethan blinked and looked up. "Sorry." "Continue." The presentation resumed, but numbers sounded meaningless now. Profit projections, international expansion, quarterly growth. None of it carried the same weight after a 5-year-old boy grabbed his hand outside a cafe like trust was the most valuable thing in the world. Ethan's phone vibrated quietly beside the folder in front of him. Claire had added a new calendar reminder that morning. Noah football training, Thursday, 4:30 p.m. Ethan stared at the words for a second longer than necessary. Then another notification appeared underneath. Lily School Art Show, next Wednesday. He had asked Claire to add every event Charlotte mentioned casually over the weekend. Claire never commented on it, but Ethan noticed the way her voice softened now whenever she discussed the children. Even the office atmosphere had changed after the gala disaster became public. Because despite expensive public relations efforts, the internet had exploded with photographs from that night. Billionaire CEO discovers he has twins at charity gala. Secret family stuns Sydney business world. Most articles focused on scandal, but the public focused on something else entirely. The photographs of Ethan staring at Noah, like his entire world had cracked open. Mr. Calloway, another executive interrupted nervously. Do you approve the acquisition terms? Ethan looked down at the paperwork, then slowly closed the folder. Postpone the acquisition. Silence filled the boardroom instantly. Several executives looked genuinely horrified. Sir, one investor protested carefully. We have spent 8 months negotiating this merger. Ethan stood calmly. Then waiting another week will not destroy civilization. The room fell completely silent. Ethan never delayed business decisions for emotional reasons. Ever. But as he walked out of the boardroom, ignoring stunned expressions behind him, he realized something important. He spent most of his adult life believing successful men sacrificed personal happiness because ambition required discipline. Now he understood the truth was uglier. He had simply learned how to prioritize work because work never risked breaking his heart. Meanwhile, across the city, Charlotte balanced 2 takeaway coffees and a folder of payroll documents while hurrying through the construction office where she worked. Phones rang constantly around the cramped accounting department while rain tapped against narrow windows overlooking a half-finished apartment development nearby. Her manager appeared beside her desk looking exhausted. Charlotte, any chance you can stay late tonight? Charlotte glanced immediately at the clock. For 12 p.m. I have to pick up my children. Right. He rubbed his forehead apologetically. Sorry, I forgot. Charlotte forced a polite smile before returning to spreadsheets. But stress sat heavy inside her chest all afternoon. Bills, school fees, grocery costs, electricity. The familiar mental calculations never stopped. And now Ethan's sudden return complicated everything emotionally before she even had time to process it properly. Her phone buzzed softly against the desk. Unknown number. Charlotte hesitated before answering quietly. Hello. Hi. Ethan's voice. Low. Careful. Somehow nervous. Charlotte sat back slightly in surprise. Is everything okay? Yes. A pause. I just wanted to ask permission before doing something. Charlotte frowned slightly. Permission? I was thinking about sending flowers to Lily after her art show next week. Charlotte blinked. The question itself caught her completely off guard. Not because of the flowers. Because Ethan was asking instead of deciding. You call me to ask permission about flowers? Ethan sounded mildly embarrassed now. Apparently, I am learning boundaries late in life. Against her own will, Charlotte smiled faintly at her desk. Lily likes sunflowers. Silence lingered for a second. Softer now. Then Ethan cleared his throat slightly. Thank you. Charlotte should have ended the call there. Kept distance. Protected herself emotionally. But instead she heard herself asking quietly, how was work? Ethan laughed once without humor. I postponed a major acquisition because I kept thinking about football schedules. Charlotte stared out the rain-covered office window. That sounds serious. It is terrifying, Ethan admitted softly. The honesty in his voice unsettled her more than charm ever could. Before she could answer, a small voice suddenly shouted through the office entrance. Mom! Charlotte turned immediately. Noah and Lily rushed inside, still wearing school uniforms, while Ethan's driver stood awkwardly behind them holding backpacks. Charlotte stood so quickly her chair nearly tipped over. What happened? Noah looked confused. Nothing. Lily pointed toward the driver. The nice man picked us up because the rain got really bad. Charlotte's heart stopped. She grabbed her phone tighter. Ethan, before you panic, Ethan interrupted quickly. The school called because there was flooding near the pickup area, and you were unreachable during payroll processing. I sent Daniel because I knew you would still be working. Charlotte looked toward the twins laughing beside the office printer while rain hammered outside. Relief mixed dangerously with gratitude inside her chest. Ethan continued carefully. I hope that was okay. Again, permission, respect, consideration. The things she begged for years ago when they were married. Charlotte closed her eyes briefly. Yeah, she whispered softly. It was okay. Noah suddenly grabbed the office phone from her desk before she could react. Hi. Ethan laughed quietly through the speaker. Hey, mate. Noah grinned. Mom looks less stressed now. Charlotte covered her face with one hand instantly, while Ethan fell completely silent on the other end of the line. Because after years of corporate achievements and public admiration, nobody had ever complimented him for making someone feel less stressed before. And somehow that mattered more than all the headlines combined. Thursday afternoon sunlight spilled across the football grounds while children raced across wet grass beneath a pale blue Sydney sky, still carrying traces of winter cold. Ethan arrived 20 minutes early this time. Not because he needed to, because he wanted to. He stood beside the chain-link fence holding a paper bag from a bakery near Circular Quay, while parents slowly gathered around the field carrying folding chairs and takeaway coffees. Ethan had another investor dinner scheduled tonight, with executives flying in from Hong Kong. Claire nearly fainted when he instructed her to reschedule it around a 5-year-old's football training session. But somehow the decision felt obvious. Noah spotted him first again. "He is here," the little boy shouted toward 2 teammates before sprinting across the grass, so fast he nearly slipped in the mud. Ethan barely had time to brace himself before Noah crashed directly into him in a messy, excited hug. For one stunned second, Ethan simply froze. Then his arms wrapped around the little boy automatically. Warm, real, fragile. Noah pulled back, grinning. "You came early." Ethan smiled down at him. "I brought bribery." Noah looked immediately at the bakery bag. "Is that banana bread?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You can identify baked goods on site. Mom makes it when she is stressed." Ethan's chest tightened painfully at the casual honesty. Charlotte arrived moments later carrying Lily's art supplies and a half-zipped jacket over one arm. Her hair blew softly across her face in the wind while she hurried toward them looking apologetic. "Sorry, parking was impossible." Ethan took the art supplies from her without hesitation. "You are fine." The exchange happened so naturally both of them noticed it afterward. Small acts of partnership returning quietly like muscle memory. Lily tugged excitedly on Ethan's sleeve. "My art show is tomorrow." Ethan nodded seriously. "I know." Lily blinked. "You remembered?" Ethan crouched slightly beside her. "I remember everything now." Charlotte looked away toward the football field because something about that sentence felt dangerous against her heart. Training started shortly afterward while parents spread out beside the field beneath bright afternoon light. Ethan sat beside Charlotte on the aluminum benches while Noah chased footballs across the grass laughing with teammates. Every few minutes Noah glanced toward the sidelines checking whether Ethan still watched. Ethan always did. Charlotte noticed it every single time. "You know he talks about you constantly now," she admitted quietly. Ethan looked over. "Good things or bad things?" "Mostly football statistics and whether billionaires eat cereal." Ethan laughed softly. "For the record, yes. We eat cereal." Charlotte smiled despite herself. "I told him that." Silence settled comfortably between them for a moment while whistles echoed across the field and children shouted through the cool afternoon air. Then Ethan spoke more quietly. "I met with lawyers yesterday." Charlotte's body immediately tensed. Ethan noticed and shook his head quickly. "Not for custody battles." She relaxed slightly but stayed cautious. "Then why?" Ethan stared at the field before answering. "I needed to understand what rights you have been carrying alone for 5 years." Charlotte looked at him carefully now. Ethan rubbed one hand across his jaw tiredly. "Charlotte, you should never have had to manage all of this by yourself." "I managed. That is not the point." His voice softened. "You survived because you had no choice." The honesty in his tone unsettled her again. Ethan had changed. Not dramatically, quietly, like grief and fatherhood were reshaping him from the inside out. Noah suddenly tripped near the goalpost while chasing the ball and immediately looked toward the sidelines. Ethan stood instinctively before realizing Noah had already recovered and continued running. Charlotte noticed anyway. "You panic every time he falls." Ethan sat back down slowly. "I missed 5 years. My brain assumes disaster immediately now." Charlotte looked at him for a long second before speaking carefully. "You do not have to earn their love by being perfect." Ethan stared out at the field. "That would be unfortunate because I am very bad at this." Charlotte almost laughed. "You drew emotional sharks on a cafe napkin." Ethan smiled faintly. "That was artistic vulnerability." The sound of Charlotte laughing softly beside him hit Ethan harder than any boardroom victory ever had. He had forgotten how much he missed making her laugh. Not polite social laughter. Real laughter that brightened her entire face for a second before exhaustion returned. The realization hurt because he understood now that he used to be one of the reasons she smiled instead of one of the reasons she looked tired. Training ended near sunset while cold orange light stretched across the field. Noah raced toward the benches breathless and muddy while Lily proudly showed Ethan another drawing from school. "That is us," she explained seriously, pointing at stick figures beneath a giant yellow sun. Ethan studied the drawing carefully, for figures holding hands, one much taller than the others. His throat tightened instantly. "Can I keep this?" Lily looked delighted. "Really? Absolutely." She handed him the paper like it was treasure. And to Ethan, it was. As parents and children slowly drifted toward parked cars, Noah suddenly asked the question Charlotte feared was coming eventually. "Can Dad come over for dinner?" Silence. Ethan immediately looked toward Charlotte instead of answering himself. Respect again. Permission. Charlotte's pulse quickened unexpectedly. Their apartment was small, personal, intimate in ways expensive restaurants and football fields were not. Letting Ethan into that space felt dangerous. But Noah's hopeful expression and Lily clutching Ethan's hand made refusal feel impossible tonight. Charlotte finally exhaled quietly. "Only if everybody is okay with takeaway pizza." Noah cheered loudly enough for nearby parents to laugh. Ethan looked stunned for half a second before recovering. "I am very okay with pizza." The drive back to Parramatta felt strangely warm despite the cooling evening outside. Noah talked nonstop about football rankings while Lily fell asleep against Ethan's shoulder in the back seat halfway through traffic. Ethan barely moved the entire ride home, afraid of waking her. Charlotte watched him carefully through the rearview mirror. His large hand rested gently near Lily's tiny sneakers while city lights flickered across his tired expression. For the first time in years, Ethan Calloway did not look powerful. He looked peaceful. And somehow that frightened Charlotte more than the billionaire version of him ever did. The apartment. Above the bakery smelled like melted cheese, warm bread, and garlic seasoning by the time Ethan carried the pizza boxes upstairs behind Charlotte. Noah ran ahead, unlocking the door dramatically, while Lily sleepily rubbed one eye beside him, still holding Ethan's hand from the car ride. The small apartment glowed with soft yellow light from mismatched lamps, while rain tapped gently against the windows overlooking the narrow Parramatta Street below. Ethan stepped inside carefully, suddenly aware that this place contained 5 years of memories he had never been part of. Family photos covered one wall near the kitchen. Noah's first school portrait. Lily wearing fairy wings at a birthday party. Crayon drawings attached to the fridge with colorful magnets. Tiny ordinary moments frozen into existence without him. Ethan stared at them quietly while Charlotte set plates onto the small dining table. "You can sit," she said softly. Ethan nodded absently, but his eyes remained fixed on a photograph near the bookshelf. Charlotte noticed immediately. The picture showed Noah and Lily around 3 years old sitting on a picnic blanket beneath a tree while Charlotte laughed beside them. Tired. Windswept. Happy. Ethan swallowed hard. "You looked," he stopped himself. Charlotte glanced at the photo too. "Exhausted." "Loved," Ethan corrected quietly. The apartment fell silent for one painful second. Noah interrupted before the moment could deepen. "Dad, come see my dinosaur collection." The word hit Ethan physically every single time. "Dad." Noah said it naturally now, without hesitation. Ethan followed him toward the corner bedroom where toy dinosaurs lined a shelf beside football trophies and messy stacks of picture books. Lily curled onto the lounge wrapped in a blanket, while Charlotte watched Ethan crouch beside Noah, listening with complete seriousness as the little boy explained prehistoric extinction theories with dramatic hand gestures. "This one is the strongest," Noah declared proudly, holding up a plastic Tyrannosaurus Rex. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Looks emotionally stable too." Noah laughed loudly. "That does not even make sense." Charlotte smiled despite herself from the kitchen doorway. Ethan looked over his shoulder toward her briefly, and the familiar warmth in his eyes nearly unraveled her composure completely. Dinner happened crowded around a tiny table clearly designed for 3 people instead of 4. Noah talked nonstop, while Lily occasionally interrupted with dramatic corrections about cartoon facts and school gossip. Ethan listened to every word like each sentence mattered. Because to him, they did. Charlotte noticed how naturally he adapted himself to the children. Not performative. Not forced. Present. The version of Ethan she once begged the universe to keep. After pizza, Noah insisted everyone play board games despite Charlotte warning him it was already late. One game. She compromised tiredly. Then bed. Noah celebrated like he negotiated an international peace treaty. Ethan ended up sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, while Lily carefully explained rules to a game clearly missing several pieces. Charlotte folded laundry nearby, trying unsuccessfully not to watch them too closely. Ethan lost spectacularly. Noah celebrated every victory with unrestrained joy while Lily accused Ethan of strategic emotional cheating after he forgot multiple rules. Ethan accepted defeat with surprising grace. "I have been professionally humbled by children," he announced dramatically. "This is a new chapter for me." Charlotte laughed softly before she could stop herself. Ethan looked up immediately at the sound. Their eyes met across the small living room while Noah rearranged game cards beside them. For one dangerous moment, the years between them felt thinner somehow. Then Lily yawned so hard, she nearly fell sideways into Ethan's shoulder. Charlotte stood immediately. "Okay, bedtime." Noah groaned dramatically. "We are not tired." Lily yawned again, directly contradicting him. Ethan smiled. "Mate, your sister looks unconscious." The bedtime routine unfolded with practiced chaos. Charlotte could perform half asleep by now. Toothbrushes, pajamas, missing stuffed animals. Noah insisting dinosaurs needed blankets too. Ethan watched quietly from the hallway at first until Lily suddenly held up a book toward him. "Will you read tonight?" Ethan froze completely. Charlotte looked up from fixing Noah's blanket. The room became very still. Lily's expression stayed innocent. Hopeful. Ethan swallowed carefully. "Only if your mom says it is okay." Charlotte stared at him for several seconds. Permission again. Respect again. Slowly she nodded once. One story. Ethan sat awkwardly on the edge of Lily's bed while Noah immediately squeezed beside him under the blanket. The book was about a lost koala searching for home across Australia. Ethan's voice started slightly uncertain at first, but grew steadier as the story continued. Noah interrupted constantly with questions while Lily slowly drifted sleepier against Ethan's arm. Charlotte stood quietly in the hallway listening. The sight nearly broke her heart in ways she could not explain. Because this should have happened years ago. Ethan should have been here for all of it. Bedtime stories. Toothpaste disasters. Tiny pajamas hanging beside the heater. Ordinary love. By the final page, Lily had already fallen asleep curled against Ethan's side, while Noah fought sleep stubbornly. "Dad," Noah whispered softly. Ethan looked down immediately. "Yeah." Noah hesitated sleepily. "You are coming back tomorrow, right?" Ethan's expression shifted instantly. Something deep and vulnerable moved behind his eyes. "Yeah, mate," he answered quietly. "I am coming back tomorrow." Noah nodded once satisfied before drifting asleep moments later. Ethan remained sitting perfectly still afterward, afraid to wake Lily resting against him. Charlotte finally stepped into the room quietly. Their eyes met above the sleeping twins. Neither spoke immediately. Ethan carefully helped settle Lily beneath the blanket before standing slowly beside Charlotte near the bedroom doorway. Soft nightlight shadows stretched across the hallway while rain whispered faintly outside. Ethan looked exhausted now. "Human. I missed everything," he said quietly. Charlotte crossed her arms loosely against her chest. "You missed a lot." Ethan looked back toward the children sleeping peacefully together. "Thank you for not teaching them to hate me." Charlotte's throat tightened unexpectedly. "I wanted them to grow up loved, not angry." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Because even after everything he put her through, Charlotte still chose kindness over revenge. The realization humbled him more than any public humiliation ever could. Ethan moved toward the front door, quietly gathering his jacket, while Charlotte walked him downstairs to the bakery entrance beneath the apartment. The street outside glistened with rainwater reflecting soft amber streetlights across the pavement. Neither seemed eager to end the evening yet. Ethan finally looked at her carefully. "Charlotte." "Yeah." He hesitated like the next words genuinely frightened him. "I know I do not deserve another chance with you." Charlotte's pulse quickened immediately. Ethan continued softly before she could answer. "But I would spend the rest of my life trying to deserve the family I almost lost." The honesty in his voice hit harder than promises ever could. Charlotte looked away toward the rain-covered street because tears threatened suddenly, and she refused to let him see them first. 3 months later, spring sunlight poured through the open windows of the small apartment above the bakery while the smell of cinnamon rolls drifted upstairs from below. Saturday morning noise filled every corner of the home now. Lily sat cross-legged on the lounge floor, drawing sunflowers with pink markers, while Noah raced through the hallway, wearing football socks and absolutely no shoes despite Charlotte telling him twice already to get dressed properly. "Mate," Ethan called from the kitchen. "If you miss practice because you cannot find your own sneakers, that is natural selection." Noah gasped dramatically. "Dad." Ethan grinned while flipping pancakes beside the stove, wearing jeans and an Old Navy jumper instead of $1,000 suits. Charlotte stood near the coffee machine, watching the scene quietly, with folded laundry resting against her hip. The apartment still felt small, still slightly cramped, but somehow it no longer felt heavy. Ethan had not moved in officially. Not yet. They were taking things slowly, carefully, not because love was absent, but because Charlotte had learned the hard way that apologies were only words until time proved them true. Ethan understood that now. He no longer asked how long it would take. He no longer tried to negotiate forgiveness like a business deal. He simply showed up. Football practices, school pickups, bedtime stories, parent-teacher meetings, grocery shopping disasters because Ethan once accidentally bought 15 liters of milk during a helpful supermarket run. He also set up child support through proper legal channels, not as a gift and not as a performance, but as responsibility. When Charlotte resisted, he did not argue. He only said quietly, "This is not me buying my way back. This is me finally carrying what I should have carried from the beginning." That sentence stayed with her. The children adored him completely now. And perhaps more terrifyingly, Charlotte was falling in love with him again. Not with the billionaire from magazine covers. With this version. The man who sat through school art shows like they were board meetings worth millions. The man who learned Lily preferred crustless sandwiches and Noah hated thunderstorms. The man who left investor dinners early because family movie nights mattered more. The man who asked before entering rooms that were not yet fully his. Ethan turned slightly toward Charlotte, holding out a plate. "Taste test." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "Should I be concerned?" "Probably." She accepted the pancake anyway and immediately laughed. "You forgot sugar." Ethan looked offended. "That feels aggressive." Noah suddenly sprinted into the kitchen, carrying one sneaker triumphantly above his head. "Found it." Lily did not even look up from her drawing. "You still need the other one." Noah froze. Ethan burst out laughing so hard, he nearly dropped the spatula. Charlotte watched him with warmth. She no longer tried hiding from herself anymore. Somewhere along the way, the apartment above the bakery stopped feeling like survival and started feeling like home again. Still, healing was not a straight line. Some nights, Charlotte woke with old fear sitting in her chest, remembering the cold way Ethan once chose phone calls over her tears. Some mornings, Ethan stood in the hallway after the children left for school, staring at their little shoes by the door as if grief had found him again. He missed first steps, first birthdays, first fevers, first drawings. No amount of money, regret, or love could return those years. One evening, Lily found him sitting quietly beside the bookshelf, holding an old photo of the twins at 3 years old. "Are you sad?" she asked. Ethan looked at her and answered honestly. "A little." "Because you were not there?" His throat tightened. "Yes." Lily climbed beside him and leaned against his arm. "You are here now." It was not forgiveness in the grand dramatic way adults imagined it. It was smaller than that. A child leaning against him. A drawing taped to his fridge. Noah saving him a seat at football. Charlotte leaving an extra mug beside the coffee machine without saying anything. Tiny doors opening one at a time. Later that afternoon, sunlight stretched across the football grounds while parents gathered beside the field carrying coffees and folding chairs exactly like every other weekend. Only this time, Charlotte sat beside Ethan naturally while Noah practiced penalty kicks and Lily braided wildflowers near the benches. Ordinary happiness. The kind neither of them trusted immediately, because both knew how fragile life could become. Ethan's phone buzzed softly beside him with another message from international investors requesting emergency meetings in Singapore next month. He glanced at the screen briefly before silencing it without hesitation. Charlotte noticed. Important. Ethan looked toward the football field where Noah waved excitedly after scoring. Not compared to that. Charlotte smiled faintly. You used to think work was the most important thing in the world. Ethan leaned back against the bench thoughtfully. I used to think success meant being admired. He looked toward the children. Turns out it means being trusted by the people who know exactly how badly you failed. Charlotte felt her chest tighten unexpectedly. That was the difference now. Ethan no longer spoke like a man trying to sound redeemed. He spoke like a man who understood redemption was not a speech. It was repetition. It was being there when nobody clapped. It was doing the small things after the apology, long after the tears dried. Noah ran toward them flushed with excitement. Coach says we might make finals this year. Ethan immediately stood. That deserves celebration. Ice cream? Noah asked hopefully. Ethan looked toward Charlotte first automatically. Permission. Respect. Always now. Charlotte laughed softly. Fine. But small cones. Noah cheered loudly while Lily grabbed Ethan's hand instantly. As they walked toward the nearby ice cream stand beneath warm spring sunlight, several parents smiled politely at Ethan without recognizing one of Australia's most powerful businessmen. And Ethan preferred it that way. No cameras. No headlines. Just sticky fingers, football grass, and children arguing about ice cream flavors beside him. Halfway across the park, Noah suddenly stopped walking and looked up at Ethan seriously. Dad. Ethan glanced down immediately. Yeah, mate. Noah hesitated. Are you happy now? The question hit harder than any financial interview Ethan had ever faced. He looked around slowly. Charlotte beside him. Lily humming softly while holding his hand. Noah waiting patiently for an answer beneath bright afternoon sunlight. Peace. Real peace. Ethan swallowed against unexpected emotion before answering honestly. Yeah. Noah smiled proudly like he personally solved the problem himself. Charlotte looked away quickly because tears threatened suddenly again. Ethan reached for her free hand quietly as they continued walking across the grass together. This time, Charlotte did not pull away. Above them, warm Australian sunlight stretched across the football field while children laughed in the distance and spring wind moved softly through eucalyptus trees. Ethan once believed power meant controlling every outcome. Then he lost the only people who could have taught him what power was really for. Now he understood. Money could build towers, buy silence, fill ballrooms, and place a man's name on every headline in the city. But money could not kiss a child's forehead after a nightmare. It could not rewind a missed birthday. It could not hold a family together when pride had already pushed love out the door. Only presence could do that. Only humility could do that. Only love, repeated in ordinary moments until trust finally dared to breathe again, could do that. Ethan looked down at Noah's small hand in his, and then at Charlotte walking beside him. For the first time in his life, he did not feel powerful because people feared losing his approval. He felt powerful because two children trusted him enough to laugh beside him, and one woman he had wounded still believed he might become better than the man who broke her heart. The empire had made Ethan Calloway rich, but love, patient and undeserved and painfully honest, had finally made him human.